And we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all, wherever you're chiming in from. This is the first edition of the Static Web Apps Community Stand-Up for the year 2024. We last left off with one of our last ones over in November. This is our first one. We have a good scheduled plan for today. We're going to highlight a couple of the community contributions, and we're going to be diving into the topic of building static websites with content management systems. In this case, we're going to be featuring WordPress, but we could probably use this in a bunch of different for a bunch of different setups. So go ahead, grab a coffee. We keep this short and sweet, and we'll make sure to keep it jam-packed. Noel Berthagen, hi, chiming from Twitch, and both on Twitch and YouTube if you want to join us. Okay, we're going to start off with highlighting a couple of community contributions. Let me move on. Okay, a bunch of links. I want to go ahead and share with you specifically the various different articles. So here, Programming with Wolfgang, he wrote this article over the course of January, writing about setting up custom 404 pages for static web apps and how you can do that with the static web app configuration file. It's a pretty good article if you want to go ahead and get started better understanding how you can use the static web app config.json for your routing and all of your different configurations. We also have a blog by Matt Freer talking about .NET 8 Blazor apps, deploying them to Azure Static Web Apps. So .NET 8 was one of the biggest releases over the past year that came out in November, and you could deploy .NET 8 WASM Blazor applications to Azure Static Web Apps, and he walks us through the whole setup. Next up, we have OpenXML Developer, who talked about using Azure Static Web Apps and how you can use static web apps for your functionality and what Azure Static Web Apps does under the hood in order to serve both your static content, but also the content from your API functions. We also have Michael Manuel, who talks about using static web apps with Bitbucket. So as you know, static web apps is you can use it with a bunch of your different source code providers, source code repository providers. So whether that's GitHub, DevOps, GitLab, Bitbucket, there are integrations with all of them. And then he talks about how you can use all of these. And next up, we also have Julia, along with Frank and Jerry, who talked about Data API Builder and Static Web Apps Database Connections. Database Connections was one of these other features that was launched over the course of 2023 to make it easier for you to build web applications that use content from your database, both reads and edits to your database. And you can do that with Database Connections. Now, under the hood of Database Connections is this engine, the Data API Builder engine, that is the one that's going to convert REST and GraphQL requests that you make from your static front-end application into queries into your database. And so they have a nice setup talking about and demoing how you can use both Data API Builder and Database Connections with static web apps. Now, as always, we get all of these. We're searching them on Twitter. So if ever you have an article that you're writing up using static web apps, feel free to post them on Twitter, tag me or tag us, and we'll be able to feature them in the next community stand-up in February. With that being said, you can access all of these links at the this specific URL list. I compiled all of these so you can access them more easily, but definitely check that out. I'll see if I can go ahead and add that to the chat so it's easy to access. There we go. Yeah, so if you want to check out any of these links, feel free to check out the URL list, and you can access them that way. Now, today, what we have planned is looking at building static web apps using WordPress on App Service as a headless CMS. So as you know, static web apps, very often you'll be publishing content sites, content-heavy sites, whether that's a blog, a content marketing site. And oftentimes you'll want to be writing that content in an editor that is purpose-built for editing your content, right? You don't want to be writing your content directly in HTML or sometimes even Markdown, because that can be a bit cumbersome. And by tying it to your source code, it can make it very difficult for that editing flow to take place. So it's oftentimes you'll go ahead and separate both your front-end website and your content editing. Sometimes these are two different teams that are taking part of, and there's those workflows. And so we have split sort of tools that we can use for those. So the developers in the front end team can go ahead and use a static site generator like Jekyll or Hugo or Next.js and write the content and then pull the data from a content management system, in this case, a headless CMS. And what we mean by that is that it won't provide the interface and the front end, but it will provide the tooling that the editors need in order to generate the content. Now, this is what we mean by a content management system, and this is how we're going to be using WordPress on App Service. And then when we build our static front end, we'll be pulling the data from our WordPress on App Service. So I actually want to show you what that looks like in action. A quick diagram is going to help us understand how this is working. Oh, okay. I'm just going to load. Yep. Okay. Let's see. And then I want to bring over. I'm going to start by showing you a quick diagram of what this is going to look like. I'm going to be demoing an application, in this case, built with Next.js, that pulls the content of the website, so the written blogs and the written posts, from a WordPress on App Service instance. And then in the WordPress on App Service instance, this is the content management system. It's going to be providing us the tooling that we need in order to write with a WYSIWYG editor the different content that we want to have. And then we'll actually also integrate the WordPress on App Service with a specific plugin that is going to trigger rebuilds of our Next.js site. And at the end, we'll have built a content site like this, where our site is actually built in Next.js, but the content is written in and stored in our WordPress on App Service instance. Now, this way, we're actually going to be able to benefit and have all the flexibility of writing our front-end application while still benefiting from the tooling that's provided in WordPress as a content management system. Okay, so we're not going to jump into the code application working, and seems like I just need to change a couple things. And so right now I'm working with this developing locally, and I'm still getting the data from my WordPress editor. I just want to make sure that I have everything working. Now, while I spin up the dev server, I do want to talk about the architecture here. For this specific demo, I have a WordPress on App Service instance created, and I also have a scaffolded Next.js project. And I'm going to show you how we can go ahead and pull the content from our WordPress on App Service instance. Now, here I have an app service, and I want to show you. Let me see what I can do here. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you. I have a WordPress on App Service instance. Here I have my simple domain, and as you can see here, this is my WordPress instance. Here's the front end of the WordPress, and we can actually access the admin administrating dashboard. And in the admin dashboard is where we're going to be able to write posts, edit posts, delete posts. Now, WordPress comes out of the box with both. Let me see here. Oh, okay. I had a typo in my URL. So you'll be familiar with the dashboard for WordPress. it provides both the place where you can edit your posts and your media and your pages, but WordPress actually comes with both tooling sets out of the box. Your editing tooling set, so for editing your content, and also a WYSIWYG website builder. Now, in this case, we're not going to be using the WYSIWYG website builder. We'll only be using the content editing, and we'll be using the rest of WordPress as a headless CMS. Okay, and Jim, I'll get to your question in just a second. I just want to get done with this here. So this is actually where we're going to be able to edit our content. And you can imagine the same way that we would do this in a headless CMS, we can go in here and make any updates to our content and then publish and preview our edits. Now, what we can also do is go ahead and pull this content from our WordPress instance using the inbuilt APIs. Now, for reference, if you go to the WordPress docs, you can actually see that there's a built-in REST APIs that allows us to access all of the information from our WordPress instance. And so in this case, if we wanted to go and extract the various posts that we have for our WordPress instance, we can actually go to the /wp JSON /wp /v2/posts endpoint in order to retrieve all of this via this API. So making a simple GET request to this specific route will go ahead and access all of the data that we're going to need in order to write our Next.js application. So I'll show you how we can do just that. And this is actually why I decided to use Next.js, is because we do have, to your point, Jim, we do have better support for hybrid web apps support with Next.js coming out soon. It's something that we've been working on, and we're very excited to essentially bring out and unveil. It's still under the covers. We're still working on it, but right now we're looking at, in the next couple of months, announcing an update to Next.js to make sure that we have better support for that. So anyways, that's why I decided to use Next.js, and I want to show you how in Next.js we can go ahead and build this content site, pulling our data from our headless WordPress instance. Okay, so let me open up VS Code, and I'm going to start off with the page.tsx file. Okay, so right now I have basically a pretty empty Next.js project. I created it with create next app. And what we're going to do is we're first going to create a page that is going to be the home page. Okay, I want to focus on just the page for now. In the page, what we can do is have a fetch request to our WordPress URL. So I have this encoded as an environment variable here, just to make it easier to access anywhere in my application. And then we'll be accessing the same URL that I showed that we could access here. And from here, we're essentially going to be getting the page and its content. And using this page and its content, we can actually see that we can get the HTML rendered content that we're getting from our WordPress instance. And so in this case, we can see that we're getting both the page and the content and what's rendered. And so if we were to take a look at our running application, and I were to go back to the home page, what you'll see is that, oh, okay. So this is actually the page.tsx, which is in the root of my app directory. Like I mentioned, we're making that fetch request to the WordPress URL. And what we're doing is for each of the posts that we received, we are rendering a specific component. Now, this is more so styling, but in this postcard, we're making sure that given a title, an excerpt, an image URL, and a slug, we're rendering HTML in order to display that to our users. But this is essentially it. We're getting all this information from the WordPress instance and then displaying that here. Oops, I wanted to, yeah. So displaying that here. in our page.tsx. So as you can see here, we have a list of various so as we can see here, we have a list of postcards, and we're passing all of the information down here. And this is actually what's being rendered for each of these. Now, as well, what we can do is the same for an individual post. So if I were to click into one of these individual posts, we can see from our post instance that for each post, what we're going to be doing is fetching the specific post by the slug. The slug is how we're going to identify the page. It's essentially going to be the identifier for the specific page. And once we get this response, we have, once again, a specific component that is going to be extracting the information from the response of the WordPress instance and then displaying that via simple HTML. Now, this is what we see here. We see all of the information that we have received from our WordPress blog. So this is the same exact thing that we would see as we're making edits here. We can do the same for all of the components of WordPress, so whether that's blogs, blog posts, or pages. And so I have that demoed as well in the contact and the sample page. So this is pulling data that is defined in our pages here with the sample page and the contact page, as I mentioned. Now, what we could do if we wanted to is build our application locally, and we would be able to get all of the statically rendered pages and then deploy that to static web apps. What I'm going to do instead is deploy this to GitHub. I already have my application stored in GitHub. And so what I can do is show you that here I have this sample template, and I've created a static web app instance for this specific template. So with this template, when the GitHub action is going to be running in order to build the website, it's going to be pulling the data, the live data from our WordPress site in order to create that statically rendered application. Now, the other thing is that in addition to creating this website, what you'll see is that I've decided to statically render all the pages in order to have the best performance. But what that means is that we might also want to re-trigger a build of our content site when anyone makes an edit to our WordPress instance. And in this case, I went ahead and added a plugin to my WordPress instance where I can add my GitHub repository URL along with a personal access token, such that every time I make an edit to my specific posts, it will go ahead and trigger a rebuild of my application. So for instance, if I wanted to, I could show you that welcome to this month's newsletter, testing from community stand-up. And then I were to update this specific post, my GitHub actions will actually be re-triggered by that specific plugin that I've added here. So this is essentially how we can use WordPress along with static web apps. So WordPress on App Service along with static web apps in order to build a static content site that works with our content that's been edited in our WordPress instance, and that we can also access in our static web app, and we can use the content in our front-end application, our Next.js application. So if we look here, I'll show you the built website. This specific website, we'll see that we have the various contact page, sample pages, and pages that we obtained from our WordPress instance. So that's basically it. That's all I had for this demo. This was a quick demo, actually. I'm going to be compiling this into a specific blog post that'll be coming out on the tech community, and we'll have a better chance to go ahead and see all of the specific steps. So definitely stay on the lookout for that in the next week. And that's it. So that was a quick view of using static web apps with a headless content management system, such as in this case using WordPress as a headless CMS, and using that content in order to build a statically generated website, and in order to have that flexibility and be able to leverage all the features of our specific front end website to build the best experience. Now, go ahead, leave us some feedback. We'll see you again in the next edition of the Community Stand-Up. And on this note, have a good day, and we'll see you again in the next one.